So I have two people to thank for my writing career. One, my wife, who has an actual real job that makes enough money that I can sit home and try to build something really self-indulgent into a career, and have been mildly successful at doing that. And two, my mother for introducing me to zombies. My mom, for my birthday, which is June 12th, in case you've been wondering and putting that on your calendar and figuring out what you're going to get me. It could be anything, really. I enjoy gifts of all sorts and sizes. But what my mom got me was she rented a projector, an actual film projector from the library, and the canisters of Night of the Living Dead. And I had the neighbor kids over, only those who I deemed, reasonably sane, who wouldn't go screaming off into the night after they had seen the movie or whatever, because I wouldn't like to hang around those people anyway. But at that time, I don't mind wimps these days. If I can punch them, it's fine. But, so we played it against the wall, and we all watched a bunch of grown men and women in scary makeup eat intestines and livers and things like that. And we watched a little girl die in a basement and then come back to life and kill her mother with a garden implement, and then her father, additionally. And that was it. I was hooked. I mean, I loved it. It was like, I think what I love the most about it is that more than any other movie monster, a zombie is something that we can put ourselves into. You can really identify with the idea that this creature that's standing before you is sort of a resemblance, a mirror of what you might look like when you're dead. And so there's a horror in that is something that's completely unavoidable. When you look at a vampire, you don't get that experience because, that's just not realistic. But when they do zombies, I mean, they show the rot. They show it happening. And so, anyway, since that point, I had to get every single genre of zombie movie out there. The zombie comedies, the Italian zombie stuff, which is really gross, but I loved it, and I still do. And then all of the sort of schlocky 80s zombies that were not really all that entertaining. But before Return of the Living Dead, I don't know if you guys know this, but the movie Return of the Living Dead, which is directed by Dan O'Bannon, before that date, zombies were not known for eating brains. That was the first movie, and I think that was like 80-something, 86 maybe, 85. Before that, no zombies were eating brains. They were just eating people. And that was the movie that was known for, like, the zombies calling, like in the ambulance, calling back to the dispatch, send more ambulances, anyway, which is the lamest rendition of that line I've ever uttered or heard, for that matter. Anyway, and so when I started writing like 6 years ago, the one of the biggest things that popped into my mind was that I needed to write about zombies, and so I did, and that's kind of how I got my adult career going, adult fiction career, urban fantasy. And so when I went to go write the YA, I was like, well, I can't write about zombies, can I? And so I haven't really, but I mean, Velveteen, when you get into it, you're gonna notice that there's something there that is distinctly zombie-like. And even though it's definitely a totally different take on that monster, and it really strips it of the horror, actually, it's still like that. And I think it's appropriate that I'm writing this, or not writing this, but I'm writing this short story, and I'm doing this vlog about zombie books right now, because I accepted another anthology story thing that has to be done by the end of the month. So I'm writing this zombie short story, and they're all they've flooded back into my head again, and here we are. So, thank you, Mom, for zombies. And it was just Mother's Day. We should have watched a zombie movie together. It would have made it perfect. Anyway, so a while back, I was chatting online with Gracia from Gracia BND3, who that's her YouTube channel if you want to check it out. There, ding. And she wanted a list of adult YA or adult zombie books for I don't know who, for somebody. She thought it would be cool, and I think it would be too. So I'm gonna start off with just like 5, and then I'm gonna talk about one YA book that I think crosses over, so it's not, you know. Anyway, the first one is Scott Brown's S.G. Brown's Breathers, which is a totally sort of different take. Not that different, but it's his zombies are sentient. They go to 12-step groups, and his main character lives in his parents' basement. And it's a comedy. I mean, it's a comedy. I think when you get into the sentient stuff, it helps if it's a comedy, because you know, if it's scary and they're sentient, it's a bit of a stretch. You know, zombies are a bit of a stretch anyway. The fact that the corpse is walking around and eating people, you know. Anyway, Breathers by Scott Brown, and this, I'm not sure if this is the finished cover, because this was a galley that he sent me. But a book I think that any zombie lover needs to read is World War Z, An Oral History of the Zombie War by Max Brooks. This is just sort of a genius way of doing things. It's basically, there's an anonymous reporter who's sort of collecting all these stories from people who've survived the zombie apocalypse. And it wasn't an apocalypse. We actually won the war at some point, and people are kind of going back and telling their stories. And some of them are absolutely horrifying. There are scenes in here that are really terrifying, and I can't wait for the movie. And it's already begun production. Brad Pitt's in it, and because he owns the rights to it too. And if it comes anywhere near some of the graphic description that's in this book, it's going to be amazing and horrifying, and I'm going to love it. One of the first book, when I started reading zombie stuff more recently, the last zombie stuff I read before this was when I was in my late teens and early 20s, and that was stuff like little anthologies, you know, like Pet Sematary I would consider a zombie story, because, you know, they take their kid out and bury him, and he's sort of comes back to life, but he's not really. He's a zombie. He's horrible. And I love Pet Sematary, but those kind of things were different than what I was seeing on TV. I don't know that I was reading any zombie apocalypse stuff back even in the 80s and early 90s. But now it seems to be kind of everywhere ever since Max Brooks came up. But, I mean, before that, Brian Keene had done some things and whatever. But this guy, Joe Schreiber, his book Chasing the Dead did something so new with zombies that it really kind of got me thinking about how far you could go away from the generic, like, idea of a zombie. And it's horrifying, and it's thin. It's super quick read, and I would recommend it for anyone, young adult or adult, but it's an adult book. Another book is David Wellington's Monster Island. This has some really interesting concepts. It's pretty scary. It takes place in a world that's sort of apocalypse driven or ridden, and there's a sort of a despot from an African nation has sent his crew to New York to get medicines and things like that. So they come in on this freighter, and bad things happen in Manhattan, I'm telling you. The other thing is, and if you haven't been watching the series on AMC, or you should probably pick up the DVDs. The Walking Dead is amazing. And the graphic novel, which is, you know, it's pretty much, it's a character-driven novel, more so than all about zombies, just like the series. So I think that this is a really, if you're going to be reading zombie stuff, you've got to read Walking Dead at some point. And they've got them in these handy omnibuses now, so that's pretty cool. And the last recommendation I've got is that adults, young adults, whoever, you should be reading The Forest of Hands and Teeth by Carrie Ryan. It's just a pretty genius book. The whole series is great, and I can't recommend it enough. And Carrie's awesome. So that's it. That's my story.